Hometown Ghost Stories contains serious and often distressing events and is not intended for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
On March 24th, 1874, Erich Weiss was born in Budapest, Hungary. Over the following 52 years, the man would earn an international reputation and cement his place in history forever as the legend we now know as Harry Houdini. But his untimely death wasn't the end of his story. In life, he challenged the occult and went to war with the spiritualists. He made a pact with his wife, promising that if he were to die before her, he'd come back and make contact from the other side. If there was indeed another side. I'm Dave Wilkins, and this is Hometown Ghost Stories. Celebrity Ghosts, Harry Houdini. Erich Weiss was the son of a rabbi who emigrated from Hungary to the United States, settling in Appleton, Wisconsin. His father could never make ends meet, and after he died, Erich, who was very close with his mother, vowed he'd never fail like his father had. He had an early infatuation with magic, and idolized French magician Robert Houdin. He held the magician in such high regard that he adopted the man's last name as his own, adding an I to the end of it, becoming Houdini. Early on, he tried his hand at many different acts, thriving to become a famous entertainer. From comedy to magic to trapeze performances in New York City, all without much success. In 1894, he met and married his wife Bess, who went on to serve as his stage assistant. As I mentioned, there wasn't much success in the early years. That is, until he started escaping from handcuffs. On November 22, 1895, Harry Houdini walked into a police station in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and demanded they put him in handcuffs. After some resistance from the police, they finally agreed to secure a pair of handcuffs to his wrists. With a few quick maneuvers of his hands, he was able to drop the bracelets to the floor. The officers were stunned. They ransacked the station, bringing every style of handcuff for Harry to break out of. One by one, he freed himself from all of them. He repeated the act in Woonsocket, Rhode Island on the 27th, in Springfield, Massachusetts on the 28th, Holyoke, Mass on December 1st, and Fall River, Massachusetts on December 9th. He originally did this stunt to promote a traveling burlesque show he was part owner of, and it worked so well that it became his main act. The more famous Houdini became, the more he felt compelled to up the ante with his acts. He quickly dropped all the other acts he was wasting his time with and focused solely on the art of escape. In each city Houdini would play, he would arrange to be tested by the local jailer. Houdini would allow himself to be stripped and searched by doctors to ensure he had no concealed locks, picks, or keys. He would then be manacled, locked securely within a cell, and within minutes he would reappear free. In some instances, it would be discovered that he had unlocked the doors in the whole cell block and switched all the prisoners around. When one act started to get old, he'd dial it up. He'd challenge members of the audience to bring in handcuffs to escape from live at the show. He began upgrading his main act from handcuffs to straitjackets, from straitjackets to locked containers. One typical act he repeated over the years was escaping from a box that was locked, roped, weighted, and submerged in water from a boat. When that got old, he graduated to being suspended upside down 75 feet above ground in a straitjacket and chains. The most dangerous escape came in 1913 and was called the Chinese water torture cell. In this trick, Houdini would have to escape an extraordinary contraption resembling a fish tank. This is filled with water while Houdini is placed head down in full view of the audience. His feet would be manacled, and when the tank was covered, he would somehow escape. Shortly after Houdini implemented the water torture act while performing in Copenhagen, Harry received the life-changing news of his beloved mother's passing. He fainted when he heard the news. It took Houdini several days to make it back to New York. The family delayed burial, which is against Jewish customs, so that Houdini could have one last look at his mother. He placed in her casket a pair of wooden slippers, which she had asked him to get her in Europe. This marked a turning point in Houdini's life. His longtime friend, spiritualist Sir Arthur Doyle, and his wife, who was a medium, offered to have a seance to connect with Harry's mother. Harry went along with it out of respect for his friend, despite being a skeptic. Lady Doyle lit candles and arranged everyone in a circle to begin the ritual. After a few minutes, she made the sign of the cross and began scribbling away in her notepad. When she was done, she had 3 pages of messages to Harry from his mother. He thanked the couple, who believed the event was a success, and walked out the door, silently fuming. He was not impressed. His mother, being Jewish, would not have made the sign of the cross, and all the notes were written in English, a language his mother did not speak. After this, Houdini became obsessed with calling out spiritualists and psychic mediums he believed were fraudulent and taking advantage of people. One prominent medium he singled out was a Boston woman by the name of Mina Crandon, publicly known as Marjorie. She was the most serious contender for a $2,500 prize offered by Scientific American magazine to the first medium who could produce conclusive psychic manifestations under test conditions. Houdini eagerly joined the investigative committee. He published a pamphlet at his own expense, slamming the medium, and staged a dramatic expose at Boston Symphony Hall. The Crandons eventually caved under the massive amount of pressure drummed up by the huge influence of Houdini, and the committee voted to deny her prize. When Houdini announced to the seance attendees that the game was rigged, Marjorie and her spirit guide Walter were furious. "Houdini, you goddamn son of a bitch," Walter yelled. "I put a curse on you that will follow you every day for the rest of your short life." Before long, Houdini didn't just have Marjorie's career in a death grip, he was strangling the entire spiritualist movement. In August 1926, Walter declared, "Houdini will be dead within a year." After Marjorie's unmasking, Houdini topped it off with a one-man Broadway show called Do Dead Men Come Back, which featured the magician at his medium-busting best. Houdini went on to battle the spiritualists and psychic mediums until 1926. While on the road on October 22nd, a McGill student named J. Gordon Whitehead approached Harry, who was lying in a hotel dressing room, and asked if he could test the theory that Houdini was capable of withstanding any punch to the abdomen. Before he could get up, Whitehead attacked Houdini with a barrage of punches to the gut, causing Harry to throw his hand up and say, "That's enough." Houdini refused to stop performing, despite the excruciating abdominal pain that he was feeling. He performed 2 more shows before his wife Bess pleaded with him to see a doctor. He said, quote, "I won't miss the show. I'll perform, even if it's the last show I do." It was the last show he would do. He asked his assistant to lower the curtain during the 3rd act and collapsed where he stood. He continued to refuse medical treatment until the next morning. He was rushed to the hospital where he had his appendix removed, but it was too late. On Halloween 1926, Harry Houdini died, surrounded by his wife and his brother. Houdini himself debunked mediums, proving that most were frauds. He promised his wife Bess that if it were possible to communicate with the dead, he would come back to her should he die first, and he gave her a code to help prove it. Bess tried every year on the anniversary of his death, but was unsuccessful. After a decade, she gave up. But it didn't take long for hundreds of mediums to emerge claiming that they had received messages from the late magician. Others continue the tradition to this day, and although the official seance hasn't had any results, there have been multiple claims of sightings of Houdini's ghost at many locations, most of which theaters and venues where he performed. One theory places his ghost in Los Angeles. He's believed to haunt an old stone staircase at a ruined estate in Laurel Canyon Boulevard in Hollywood. Another theory places his ghost at Niagara Falls in Canada. The Houdini Magical Hall of Fame features some material used by the late magician. Houdini had instructed his brother to burn it in the event of his death so that nobody would learn his secrets, but that didn't end up happening for whatever reason. Now it's believed that his ghost guards the secrets. In the first year of operation, there were 6 unexplained fires, a robbery, and a freak accident where an employee walked through a plate glass window. If Houdini's ghost is haunting this museum, it is most definitely not a happy ghost. Houdini spent many years debunking the people who talk to ghosts. It is possible the man who disputed the existence of ghosts now walks the earth in spirit form. It is possible his spirit doesn't even know that he's passed on. And it is entirely possible that the great Harry Houdini became a ghost who doesn't believe in ghosts.
What's up, folks, and welcome to Hometown Ghost Stories, special side content episode, Celebrity Hauntings, the one and only Harry Houdini. I'm here with Rob Coakley. What's up, Rob?
Be so cool if I just disappeared right now.
That would be cool. Luckily, you will not get out of the handcuffs that we've placed you in for this episode because you're no escape artist.
We handcuffed you to your cursed chair.
There's no way you get out of that one. And we're here with Dave Wilkins. Dave, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
So that's the story of Harry Houdini. One of my favorites. Love this story. Such a cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, his whole story, beginning to end, is just awesome. Like his life is just crazy. For so many different reasons. You get the performance and entertainment part of it, and then you get he goes to war with the spiritualists, and then it's still going on today. He's still haunting. So it's a crazy roller coaster.
It absolutely is.
I just like that his whole job was to deceive people, and then he's like, no, not you guys though, not the way you're deceiving people. And I understand the difference.
His reasoning behind that, he says, I am an illusionist. He's like, I am here to trick you, and I'm telling you that's what I'm doing. I'm tricking you. My illusions trick you. And he says that's what his problem with the mediums were. He says you're doing the same thing I'm doing, but you're lying about it and saying that you're genuine. And that pamphlet that he put out on Marjorie was basically just like a booklet telling everyone how she does her act and how she does her tricks. And you just take each one of her he called them acts. He took each one of her acts and just debunked every single one of them, and they were pissed. They were so mad. And he didn't stop at her either. He took down several mediums, and he even went to Congress and lobbied to try and get a law passed to make it illegal for medium to take money from people. So
the story with her is very intriguing because she was, like you said in the episode, that she's one of the most well-known of the time spiritualist. And I don't know if you dove into her act at all, but apparently she used to perform on stage naked.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of her performance, she would have something she called like ectoplasm come out of parts of her body. And that was part of the show, which is, like, especially for that time period, is very sensational.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when he debunked her, he was invited to one of her seances, and he went there with the intentions of debunking her. And he sat there and he's like trying to figure out how she did everything. And he thought he had it all like figured out or something like that. And he's like, you know what? Can we do it again? Can you show me one more time? And like, he catches her red-handed, like lifting the table on her own. And that's when he was like, all right, now I got you.
Yep.
Yeah, there were a lot of these mediums and psychics that would get busted at the time. A lot of the stuff would be knocking, or they would go into like these little closets, and then ghosts would come out of the closet. And there was one that was really famous. I can't remember the names exactly, but there was this woman who had this show that was just really getting popular, or not a show, but the people would come to these seances, and she would disappear into this shelf or this like cabinet or something like that. And then moments later, this ghost would come out that did happen to look a lot like her. The thing was, she would be tied to a chair or chained to the ground inside the closet, while this ghost was walking around talking to people. And it went on for a while, and it got a lot of recognition, to a point where they had a journalist, like this doctor, who came in and lived at the house and witnessed hundreds of these performances, and he never could debunk how she was doing it and who this ghost was. And it's a long story, and there's a lot of speculation about maybe he was having an affair with her, and she had a sister that looked enough like her where she could have been chained to the ground or something like that. But you had so many of these, but a lot of these did get debunked, where there would be knocking. And there was one woman who was caught. She had a long piece of wood inside her dress, and she would just be slamming it on the floor, and they're like, oh, that's not a ghost making those noises, that's you. But there was one seance with Houdini in not with Houdini, one seance where they were trying to contact Houdini's ghost in the 70s. It was in Niagara Falls. And as they were trying to conjure up his ghost or make connection with him, I guess a flower pot fell off the shelf and Houdini's book fell off the shelf. And it just so happened to open up to the chapter about do the dead return. So that was the page that it opened up to, and everyone was like, well, that must be him. So
that must have been at that museum that is allegedly haunted. And that backstory is pretty good, because it was where they put all the secrets of his work on display that he wanted destroyed, and his brother didn't end up getting it. So I guess the story is that his ghost is there, either trying to protect it or just really pissed off that that they didn't destroy it.
Well,
it's crazy. Like, he wanted it burned, and like the building burned 6 times.
Right. Yeah, that's where I was going to go with it. Like, he wanted it all burned. I think his brother might have died unexpectedly, is what happened, or something to that effect, before he destroyed it. So, yeah, and now stuff's catching on fire there. And it's like, I think his old residence caught on fire as well. So there's a lot of fire that's tied to Houdini after his death. And it's like, is he just going around trying to get rid of anything that he can? And that's his method, is like, he's summoning as much energy as he can to try to light these things on fire. And I'm not sure if any of it got destroyed.
I don't know that it did, but I do know that like the tricks to how he did his escapes were leaked. So it's out there, and it's pretty, you say disappointing, but it's a magic act. It's an act. So that like every time you hear how somebody does a magic trick, it's always like, that's not cool. But basically, like when he was getting out of the water tanks, it was, every time that he performed behind a curtain. So they'd lower him into the tank, and they'd raise up a curtain, and then he would escape and come up from behind the curtain. So that was his act. And basically, he was just had an assistant that was just letting him out. That was how he was doing it, from behind the curtain. So it's like, I mean, those are like the really big acts where like people couldn't figure it out, but like he would really go into, he could really break out of handcuffs. He could really break out of prison cells. He was actually going in. He did it in Germany. He went to to the prison. I don't know what town it was in, but he went to the local jail there, and he was like, lock me up. This is my thing. And they're like, all right, we'll lock you up. He locks out. He broke out, and they were pissed. Like they
just arrest him. Like, yeah,
they were just,
I don't know where we're going to put you, but sit in this cruiser for now.
I know. Yeah. The German police are not known for their senses of humor, I guess, but they were not happy.
So there are 2 stories that I do want to touch on, because I'm not sure if this is the same one that you briefly alluded to. If I had actually watched your episode when you sent it, I would be more prepared for this. But there was a psychic that received.
Or if you watched it just a few minutes ago.
I did watch it then, and you didn't touch on the story that I thought you were going to touch on. So there was two different stories from the same psychic that were different than the rest, because like you said, hundreds of psychics over the years have tried to connect with those ghosts. So there was one that did deliver the message to Houdini's wife that was supposed to be a secret message that that only she knew, that Houdini did. So he delivered that message to her, and she's like, holy shit, he's got it. And then they kind of started picking around. They're like, well, if he had read extensively on this, because then it got exposed that this guy was reading into his patients before he would see them, or I don't know if you call them patients, but his clients. So that's a big no-no in the psychic community. So it's like, that's like your palm reader, doing a little Facebook search, and evaluate, like, okay, well, I know that your father must be named Frank.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, you know that because you read about it. But the other one that he got was a message from Houdini's mother, and he got that right. And Houdini had never disclosed that with anyone. So, or besides his wife. So his wife was like, how did he get that message from his mother? So she had debunked. She said that it could be neither here or there with the message that Houdini left for his wife, but there was a message that he had left for his mother, which I think was one word. It was like forgiveness or something like that. But for him to know about it and for him to guess that word correctly, that was the one that stuck out, where she was never able to figure out how he did that. Now, the fact that he was kind of exposed as a fraud, that makes me think that he might have found a way. Maybe he found a writing that Houdini made that his wife didn't know about, or something along those lines, or it was just a really lucky guess. But there was someone who did apparently crack the code.
So the code was Rosabelle, answer, tell, pray, answer, tell, look, answer.
That's the one he got that he left for his wife.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he got that correct. And then the other one was one that something to do with his mother.
Right.
Again,
Well, the
I
mother
should-
one's
I should
interesting
remember that in front of me. But
because I wonder what that was that he got from her. Because the original seance that Houdini and Sir Doyle did, Houdini was pissed off because they're like, "Oh yeah, we spoke to your mother, and she did the sign of the cross, and she's Jewish," and then rattles this,
right.
rant off in English, and he was just so mad because he's like, "She didn't speak English," So
Yeah.
so I wonder what he could have said.
You
that-
guys talk about amongst yourselves. I have a book. I'm going to go get it. And we're going to
Is
get
it-
to the bottom of this. I'll be right
What
back.
book is it? All right.
So, what the other thing I find interesting is up until at least recently, I'm not sure if they're still doing it, but this seance is still held every Halloween to try to contact the spirit of Houdini. And I know for a long time, if not still, Penn and Teller are the ones who organize it, as well as other magicians, I think. Right?
Yeah, it's a pretty big event. You have to be invited to it. You can't
Right.
anyone can't just show up. But yeah, it's a lot of magicians. I know David Copperfield was had a hand in it for a little while, and I do believe Penn and Teller. I don't know if they still do it, but they were doing it for a long time. But I know it still does happen. I think it happens in Florida. Am I wrong?
I don't know where they do it or if they change locations on it.
Hmm.
I probably should have looked more into that at some point, but I knew that was a thing that happened. That was just off of like memory from a while ago.
Yeah, which is pretty cool if they do it. Hopefully they'll see this episode and invite me.
Yeah, like can we come, please?
We come.
We did a 10-minute episode on Houdini, I think.
We did.
We now deserve to be part of this committee that brings
Forever.
Houdini back.
Exactly.
Yeah, so now
Go back
Jesse's
to the book.
distracting me. What did you
What
find?
book is it?
What did you find?
I'm not allowed to talk about it because
Museum.
it's frowned upon. You guys
know?
keep talking about yourselves.
I want to know what's frowned upon.
Yeah, what's frowned upon? Tell us. You can't leave us hanging.
Everyone yelled at me at the convention. I can't do this. You guys talk about it.
At the convention. Okay. I don't know what he's talking about. So I had read the Life and Afterlife of Harry Houdini, written by Joe. Whoops, how's that?
We are off the rails.
Posnansky.
We are off the rails on this episode.
And it was a very thorough book, and it was very good, and he covered all these things. But what he didn't cover are some of the conspiracies surrounding Houdini's death. So he died of an infection from his appendix bursting.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people are saying maybe his appendix exploded because the dude punched him. That's definitely not what happened. But the most interesting, I think, conspiracy theory surrounding his death was that the spiritualists had actually hired an assassin to poison him, and that's what the sickness was, because he was like I said earlier, he was going to Congress trying to get their practice banned legally, and it was right around the time where he got sick. So it wasn't the punch that made his appendix explode, but they're saying it could have been poison. At the time they thought it was appendicitis, so that medicine back then, who knows, it probably was, but there's a chance that he could have been poisoned, which I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's interesting.
Okay, so the skeptic, his name was Arthur Ford. I don't know if you talked about him in the episode. The original one that he went to was who? Cecilia. That was the one that he was super disappointed with.
Oh, it was Lady Doyle.
Anyways, there was also a Cecilia. Anyways,
her name might have been Cecilia.
Could have been. So first of all, he cracked the code. He did do that. He was the first one to do it. But the other one that he gave the word that from his mother was forgive. And that was something that he had been hoping to hear from Cecilia when he first began trying to make contact with her spirit. There was a family disagreement between Houdini and his brothers. That was not a publicly known thing. And then he was able to, Arthur Ford went to his grave claiming that he had received a genuine message from Houdini, and perhaps he did. So that was one that Houdini's wife thought she couldn't figure out how he knew about that. And So that was the message. But it was Arthur Ford, and like I said, he was widely criticized. It was about how he was the first one to crack the code from Houdini to his wife. Anyways,
That's pretty good. I mean, the code you can kind of explain away saying that it was available. He could have found it if he did his research. But it's interesting when in mediums they'll catch me off guard sometimes, because instinctively I feel like most of them are not honest, and every once in a while you hear a story about a medium from somewhere and they just have some information that there's just no possible way for them to have come up with.
I definitely believe that there are.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I definitely believe that there are legitimate mediums out there. I just think that there is a ton of them, and it was really bad back in this time. That was when the whole movement was. It was like the spiritualist movement. So that's when that was all happening, and it was a monetary thing. They were putting. It was basically like circus sideshows, and people would flock to go see it. There was a whole bunch of them. We're going to cover more of them for sure, because there was a bunch of really famous ones, including the Eddy brothers, which I was going to do this week on my episode. Instead, we're going to do a different one, but my following show, I'm going to cover the Eddy brothers. And this is kind of what they were doing. They had a show and nobody ever figured out how the hell they did it. These guys were like illiterate, but they were having, we'll get into it more in the show, but they were holding these seances, and there was these spirits that were conjured up that were speaking different languages from all over the world. These guys were broke. They couldn't read or write. There was no way they could have put this all together without a fortune backing them for this kind of performance. But we'll get more into that when we get there, for sure. But so I could see why like they would be so upset, and that would not surprise me if they had him killed, because he was that is a monetary reason, like that is their livelihood. So right. You could see that. But again, like I said, it was really popular in this time. It's still pretty popular today. There were a lot of bullshit artists out there, but I think there were some legitimate ones for sure, and I think there still are.
So, with all that being said, where do we land? Do we think that Houdini's ghost is roaming?
I don't.
You don't?
I do not.
I'd have to look more into the ghost stories, but
I don't. I think I
would lean more towards no, and because he hasn't really made contact with his wife.
That's what I'm thinking. Like if he was, he would have hit his wife up. He wouldn't be going to these other mediums and talking to them. I think he would have went to his wife.
Yeah.
What if he's not even going to his wife? He's just tied to the artifacts that need to be disposed of.
That's a possibility. But I think when it comes to all these psychics that are saying that they're making contact with him, I don't believe it. I believe that if he was, he would have gone out of his way to make contact with his wife. Again, we don't know the rules. Maybe he is making contact with the other psychics. Like, hey, if you see my wife, tell her I said this. I keep ending up in the wrong seances. I don't know. We don't know how it works.
Yeah,
I think. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
I think for me, if it's anything, he's just an angry spirit, almost like an Onryo, which is something we covered on some side content. Maybe not exactly an Onryo, but like that type of spirit where he's just pissed that his stuff didn't get destroyed, and maybe he's tied to it until it's actually destroyed. And that's why there's stuff catching on fire, and you catch him in places that either housed his materials in his possessions or are currently housing his possessions. So definitely, I think it's definitely a possibility.
There is always the theory that I left off that 10-minute episode with, which is if he's a ghost, he might not know he's a ghost, and he might be a ghost that does not believe in ghosts because he doesn't know he's dead.
Right.
Which is my favorite theory.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of layers to it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think it's definitely a possibility. So I don't know. I kind of lean more towards he is roaming.
I would have to look more into the hauntings aspect. The problem with a story like this is I'm way more interested in like his life story than his ghost story. But I would definitely be more prone to look into the ghost story before I make a final conclusion. But I would say I would lean more on the probably not side.
I just think that like it makes the ghost story his life story makes the ghost story more interesting.
Just such a mysterious dude. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
He's always so serious in his photos.
If anyone's going to find out how to become a ghost, it's an illusionist, right? They're going to look for every angle on something like that. So
he was mixed in with the community, whether it was good or bad. So
right.
There was that for sure. Anyways, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. This has been a side content. Celebrity hauntings. I almost said cursed possessions. Not a cursed possession, but celebrity hauntings. Harry Houdini, the ghost of Harry Houdini, perhaps. So
Perhaps.
thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back on Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we always are, for a brand new live episode of Hometown Ghost Stories. Make sure you drop a sub. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you think Harry Houdini's ghost is still lingering? And do you think that some of these mediums made contact with them? Let us know what you think.
Yeah, actually, hit us up somewhere and let us know, because I am interested to see other people's thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. And
Agreed.
the book I will now reveal was Zach Baggins' Ghost Hunting for Dummies.
Oh, that's why.
Which we got yelled at the
Oh,
convention because I
wow.
brought it up. They're like, that book.
The
I love this
plagiarist.
book. I'm going to throw it out there. I think it's a thorough book. It's
We're getting
a lot better than I thought it was going to
canceled
be.
by
Anyways,
the paranormal community now. Thanks, Jesse.
well, it's neither here nor there. But anyways, that's where that came from. So anyways, we're gone. We'll talk to you. See ya.